Our guest today is Robert Wright, one of the more genre-defying thinkers working today. Over 3 decades, he's taken big, unfashionable questions and refused to flinch. The Moral Animal brought evolutionary psychology to a general audience. Non-Zero argued that history has a direction. The Evolution of God was a Pulitzer finalist, and Why Buddhism is True became an unlikely bestseller about meditation in the mind. These days, he runs the
Was this
non-zero.
wait, whoa. Was this written by AI, Danny?
It
Is that
was
the
written by
punchline? Is that
AI.
this is such an obvious punchline. Stop. Save us the fucking time, man.
That was I said do an introduction, AI written,
Well,
for
thank
Bob
you.
Wright.
That was such an original and creative idea that I had no clue
Well,
that's where you were heading.
that's how good AI is. Bob, thank you for
It's
joining
yeah.
us.
It
Well,
sounded completely seamless.
That sounded like
well,
I said,
actually got something a little the what was the modifier of questions? What was the adjective?
uh, unfashionable.
Unfashionable. The questions aren't
Unfashionable.
unfashionable. The answers are unfashionable.
Well, I
Get
don't
a
know.
new AI.
I have
Pay
to
the
disagree.
$20 a month, Danny. Come on.
This is the AGI telling me. No, this is yeah. Oh, pay the $20 to get, you mean the higher. I thought you said pay the $20 to subscribe to non-zero. I'm like, you guys comp me. But
Oh,
you mean to the
it's
high
cheaper. Non-zero is cheaper than $20 a month. But yes, you should do that.
the
Yeah, you
higher
got to
end.
get Grok Plus or whatever. I don't know
Bob,
what.
did you know that
I
your
guess.
personal lore is unusually well suited to this book? That you interviewed Jeffrey Hinton in 1983 when neural nets were a fringe theory, and Eliezer Yudkowsky around 2010 when AI risk talk was still mostly laughed off? That I was in the room decades early angle. It's a great opening question and lets you tell it to me in your own voice. So, Bob, this interview is going to be conducted. I wanted to
Is
do it totally
Danny's
by
brain
AI.
going to take over at any point in this conversation? I kind of honestly, I'm not saying which one I prefer, but I'm just curious.
So Bob, I guess let's talk about what actually did make you want to write this book. Obviously,
Let's
AI
talk
is
about the God test. Yes,
let's
the
talk
God
about the
test,
God test.
artificial intelligence, and
Okay,
our
first of
coming cosmic
all,
reckoning.
This is
Bob
this is a
Wright,
big
friend of the show.
big issue.
it's
Obviously,
about AI.
fake AI investment is driving our fake economy. But what made you interested in AI? I mean, honestly, doing an interview even in the early '80s, even if you didn't buy it, obviously this is an issue of long interest. So how does this fit in to your trajectory here?
I have finally, 2 weeks after pub date, figured out actually how I should answer this question on podcast. I should say, it's true. It's true. So yes, I'm old enough to have interviewed Jeffrey Hinton in 1983 for a piece on AI I was writing for the Wilson Quarterly, and then decades later, 2023, I opened New York Times. The headline says, "quote Godfather of AI." That's in quotes in the headline. It's something like quits Google and warns blah blah blah. Like he's become an AI doomer, and he is the guy who is as responsible as anyone else, probably more responsible than anyone else for the so-called deep learning revolution, the neural network thing that is behind all of the recent advances you hear about, ranging from image recognition to large language models. Yeah, so here's the part I haven't said, but I should say from now on for promotional purposes, which is true. So I started wondering, I didn't really, in 1983, I did say there are these two approaches. One is mainstream, one is this maverick, kind of slightly fringe approach. That one was Hinton's. Um, and I started wondering, well, what exactly happened to make his prevail? This is early 23. I'm wondering this. I go back and read the piece, and I go listen to a lecture Hinton gave in 2018 about how these things work. And I realize there's something critical I'd missed in 1983, and it is the secret sauce to the all these models, the large language models, to the deep learning revolution. I had gotten something in my head, at least wrong, not technically factually wrong in the piece, but wrong in my head, 180 degrees wrong about what the approach was. And so I set about on this is especially what I should be saying. I began an odyssey of discovery, Danny.
Well, that sounds just
And
like
and
AI.
and what I learned in the journey, which readers can share, by the way, this is the beauty of a book, a journey that led me to discover, and this is true, what the power is, why there's been this rapid growth in capabilities of AI, and once you understand the secret sauce, why that's going to continue, and I contend be abruptly transformative. I'm on Team Earthquake in terms of predicting what's going to happen, and so the book is about explaining to people why I think that's going to happen, how this stuff works. I do pride myself on uh, uh, taking pains to explain early on in the book how these things work for a non-technical audience, and then explain why I think it's going to get more and more powerful, what uses it's going to get put to, why, for all the wonders it promises, uh, not dishonestly, there could be these wonders. There are a lot of things to worry about, and if we don't get together and focus, we could be in deep trouble. And the God Test title is it's like it has several meanings. One is it's a metaphor. I think humankind is being posed with the kind of test a god would pose. The kind of salvation is possible, but you got to get your act together. In this case, I think we need to become a true cohesive global community, quit fighting the wars and stuff, and focus, because this technology cannot be controlled and harnessed in keeping with our purposes without without a pretty fine-grained international coordination. So there.
Well, we're very close to that, so it's a good time for the book.
Yeah, just
Let's
a
let
little work to do.
Bob, one thing that I do want to talk about, and something that is always mentioned in our Discord after your episodes, is could you distinguish between different types of artificial intelligence, or talk about the one that you're specifically speaking about in the God test, and how those functionally work, because it's a little bit of a black box for non-specialists. So obviously LLMs are the ones that most people know, but there's different types of AI that people use. So maybe just
Yeah.
distinguish.
Well, there's surely predictive AI. Like as of 5 years ago, there was AI that could tell you, give you a clearer idea of like which of your insurance holders was likely to get a disease and cost you a lot of money. So in other words, don't sell them insurance, or who, this was the promise at least, who was likely to commit a crime and so on. Predictive AI. And interestingly, kind of a lot of the people who are now minimizing the power of this, the new kind of, especially on the left, got into that habit with the old kind because its value was being overstated by the people who wanted to save money, for example, by not selling you insurance. So, that became kind of a thing. Um, Now that has something in common with the new kind, but the new kind, which is machine learning, is what it has in common. I won't get into that exactly, but the new kind is the new wave is often called generative AI. It can generate language in response to questions. It can tell you what picture you're looking at. It can generate video in response to a prompt. It generates stuff. That's the label, at least. All of these are a product of the deep learning revolution, which Jeffrey Hinton had, more to do with probably than any other person. And it has to do with these neural network things. And that's the first order distinction I would make. I mean, self driving cars have the same secret sauce, and that's ultimately important to understand that it's that broad in application. Now, I guess you could call it generative AI because it generates things like turning the steering wheel to the right if you want to. But the main thing is it's the same secret sauce, which I can get into what the secret sauce is.
Yeah, I think it's important to give an understanding of how these things functionally work, because one of your arguments is that it's approaching something that might be thought of as consciousness and sort of individuation, that there's a genuine separateness here. So why don't we get it? How does it work?
Well,
Obviously, we're not
on the
specialists.
on the consciousness question, I'm agnostic. I'm not sure we'll ever know. I mean, in
that's true of
principle,
humanity, right? Like, we don't know consciousness
exactly.
right now
The
anyway. Yeah, yeah.
distinguishing property of consciousness is that you cannot verify with 100% confidence that anyone other
Correct.
than you
Yeah.
has it. That is why it's like just like a different thing, which I think not everyone completely gets. It's like not amenable to scientific analysis in the sense that everything we call physical is. But so I'm not but I also say I don't think we should conflate that question, to which we may never have the answer, with the question of its eventual capabilities. What I am saying is yeah, it's gonna increasingly do for practical purposes kind of everything we can do, and so it poses a threat in principle to all kinds of jobs, and eventually and is can already do certain things better than we can do. It's proving math theorems that had remained unproved for decades, and so on. And so yeah, in terms of capabilities, I have a very a very, well, not extreme within the AI community view, but extreme on the spectrum of public opinion, and certainly left of center, probably an extreme view. But consciousness, I consider a question best left aside, because I don't think it's the key question. Now, why do I think this? So here's the key revelation I had when I went back and read my 1983 piece. So I described in that piece something that was kind of a neural network. It was called a neural network by the guy who proposed it. It hadn't really been built, and he was a past collaborator of Hinton's. And it would, in theory, if you had built it in principle, been able to kind of process language or do something with language, disambiguate language. And so and the way it worked was like each node in the network, each of what they still call neurons, would correspond to a given sense of a different word. So if it's an ambiguous word, like throw can mean host, as in host a dance, it can mean hurl, as in throw a ball. Those different senses would live on different neurons. This is not the way contemporary models, by the way, are structured. It's not the case that each of the so-called neurons hosts a sense of word. But anyway, the key thing is I was assuming, and this was the widespread assumption, I think, of the guy who came up with the model, certainly of most of the AI community, that if you were going to have a model that could handle language well, there would have to be a way of representing meaning, which is true. You do have to have that. Our brains have it. We don't know what it is, but we must have some way of representing the meaning of words in our brains. And A, B, the assumption was, this is the part that was wrong. Most people's assumption was, my assumption was, I don't think Hinton's was, but I actually didn't know enough to find out at the time. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. The assumption was humans would have to put the meaning into the machines. So you come up with this system for representing meaning.
Right. We'd have to have 1-to-1 in the machine. The machine would have to say tree equals whatever.
Well, however it says it, the main thing is the human understanding of the meaning would have to be explicitly, consciously, systematically transplanted into the machine. There's got to be a person who knows what a shoe is and somehow maps that onto the representational scheme of the machine, or you automate it by feeding a dictionary in, or whatever. Okay. And these machines, we now know a lot more about this than at first, but they do have a system for representing the meaning of words. I can describe it, and it's actually a system that had long been conjectured to be the way human brains do it. But nobody has to tell them what the words mean. They figure it out, and they come up with the representational scheme themselves, in a sense, just in the process of getting better at what's called next word prediction, or various other tests, translating from one language to another, fill in the blank, whatever. You just give them a predictive task. And again, to the machines, these symbols we call words are just gibberish. And you're saying, okay, predict the next string of gibberish. We're not going to tell you what they mean. And we never tell them that. And yet we now know within the machines lies an actual representation of their meaning. I can talk about what that is, but the key implication is all across the board, self-driving cars, image recognition, everything else. You don't have to know how the brain does it or even come up with a theory. And this was the widespread assumption. If you go back to 1956 Dartmouth Conference and look at the founding document, it says something like, the premise of this is that anything the human brain does can in principle be so precisely described that we can make a machine do it. Well, it turns out no, you don't have to describe shit. And you have to describe some things and get it to do some things. You do not have to have even a theory as to how the human brain
So
does
let's
things.
talk about that, how it works, because on one hand, you give a machine a large enough corpus. Wouldn't it be able to determine just from reading that corpus how words function, or how is it working here? Like if you give them the entire internet, it'll see how.
This is gonna be my question.
Yeah,
Like, I
oh,
mean,
sorry,
how much
you
of
asked
this
it. Yes.
is like,
Yeah.
how much of this is not envisioning the way that these systems would function, in the early 80s versus not envisioning that at some point in the future, we were just gonna put everything out on the internet for consumption, and that
No,
these m
it's not
programs
just
would be
that.
able to
It's not just that.
devour that.
It's
Okay.
not just that. Again, most people did not understand that with a certain kind of machine, I mean, it was mapped on the human brain. The original idea was, well, let's build something like a brain, which we did, a neural network. But the idea had also been, and this was embodied in the model I did describe in the piece, the neural network, the assumption had also been, and then we'll like set it up the way we think a brain works, and but you'll have to kind of understand like how we process meaning or something. And I just want to repeat that let me describe to you. I don't know, maybe this is too technical. Go ahead and answer your, but just to give you an example of something it comes up with on our, let me give you a simpler example in visual recognition, okay? The image recognition things. All you do is you show it an image. You show it an image of a dog and it says shoe or something. And you say, no, not quite right. So you adjust the so-called weights, that is the strength of connections among neurons in some fashion. In principle, it could be random. One thing Hinton helped do is make it more efficient than that. So it's more like directional mutation in evolution than random mutation. So the changes made are more likely or than they otherwise would be to actually make it better at doing what it does. But the point is, you just keep doing that, millions and millions. You just keep on doing it. It's like evolution in that way. Tons and tons of trial and error. A lot of animals don't get it right and die, but the successful mutations are preserved, the ones that get it closer to saying dog. And then at the end, you've got a machine that can label anything correctly. And here's the point I want to make is it turns out that it kind of reinvented in the process of this something that we know the human visual system works, which is so-called, we have these edge detection neurons. So if you see a line of contrast and it's vertical, one neuron will fire strongly. If it's horizontal, there's another neuron that's specialized in firing strongly in response to horizontal lines. If it's 90 degrees, so on. Turns out that these machines, and we only understand this after the fact, okay? They master the task, and then you look inside them, and we still don't understand everything, but we understand they kind of invented an edge detection filter. It's so the same, because it's inherently valuable when an image is coming in, to start making sense of it by detecting the angle of orientation of sharp lines of contrast, because they are often the edges of objects. It reinvented that specific functional thing. And it's the same thing with its system for representing the meaning of words.
Well,
This,
Bob, I just want to ask, when you say reinvented, so there's a software program that has lines of code that does this particular thing, and you're saying in the process of doing this
no,
X number
lines
of
of
times.
code is not what's going on, but go ahead.
But this is a software, right? We're talking about a piece of
Well,
technology that
it
is a
is, it
software.
is every time one of these things does something, responds to a query or something, the way you can think of it is slightly crudely. Think of it as the neurons are in layers. And so think of it as the input coming out at the top and then something coming out at the bottom. It could be the word dog. If the input is an image, it could be an answer to a question.
But these neurons are represented how? Through lines of code or no?
Well, ultimately, in a certain sense, yes. But the key thing is this is like every time, the old approach to AI was, you ask it the question, and then it is just processed by these lines of code. In this case, the question or the image, whatever, is processed by, think of it as, okay, you always convert the stuff into numbers at the top. Every word, so to speak, roughly speaking, is a long series of technically tokens, but let's say words, is a long series of numbers separated by commas called a vector, like thousands, okay? And so you turn everything into numbers, you feed it into the top of the machine, it filters down, and it is transformed at each level. So uh, pretty much every neuron at each layer is connected to every neuron in the layer below it, but not other layers. So there's a shitload of connections compared to the number of neurons. And all these things filter down. And the key thing is the weights, the numbers associated with each connection. And that is what's determined in the training we described, okay? And also these things called, there's numbers associated with each neuron. But so you should think of it that way. And I guess I would say, like, if it were code and we had written the code, it would never surprise us in a certain sense. I mean,
Well, that's my
complicated code
question.
can surprise you, but it's what's that?
So that's actually my specific question. So at some point in the development, human beings or human whatever derived machines coded something. So I'm just curious, like where is the learning happening? Like how is it making the surprising connections? Is it rewriting itself? Is it developing logical ideas that no one predicted? I'm curious, like what's the leap between uh
Well, first
there's
of all,
code,
let me get back. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with one thing, okay? We used to think to build a self-driving car, you need to say, okay, how do we make decisions? Gosh, we see stuff and we do this. Okay, let's write that line of code. How do we do blah, blah, blah? And we used to think with image recognition, same thing. Like, how would you, let's write the algorithm for recognizing an image, process language, even predicting the next word. We have to write the algorithm. And you seem to still be on that page, like we're writing lines of code. No, no, no,
no,
no.
that's, I'm not
Let me
saying
just repeat, like, you feed the data in, and there's something that you want it to do. Like, you may feed visual data in, and you want it to do what a human would do in response, like turn the steering wheel to the right. That's the right answer, okay? So or the next word is the right answer, or dog is the right answer. And what you do, you give it the question at the top, filters down through all the neurons, gets the wrong answer. So you change the strength of the connections among some of the neurons, and it gets better and better. It really, and so, that's why we do not understand how these work. That's what I'm saying is,
yeah, so, but I'm saying when you're changing the strength of connections, how
mhm.
are those connections represented in physical reality on
Well,
in the computer?
they are not. Do not think that that each one is like an actual microchip. I mean,
No, I'm saying, but they're software. They're coded,
yes,
right?
they are. They
Yeah,
are. That
yes.
part is coded,
Right,
but
right. So basically just I want to get it right. So basically there's these strings of things that are called code in a machine. They represent different weights and different connections. And in order to get what you want, you're going up or down on these various weights and connections which are ultimately in physical reality represented by this thing called code, right?
yeah, I mean, it's numbers and yeah,
Right.
but in
So
terms of
then
the
what's the
operation of it and what you need to know to create it, it's totally different from
so
what
so
most
but my
people thought.
connection is what is happening is that once you shift these weights, it is doing surprising things. Like, and then how
It
is
is
that still not
building
human
my
derived?
contention, and a number of people in AI would agree with putting it this way, and some would have issues. But a big point I make in the book that I haven't seen much made. I think that's largely because some of the AI researchers are so immersed in this, they don't understand what would surprise people, lay people, and what wouldn't. But also because I wrote a book on evolutionary psychology called The Moral Animal. So I think, in terms of distinguishing between the equipment built into the brain by natural selection and the learning process. So often you hear training referred to as learning. And I think for some purposes, that's a good way to think of it. But I think the underappreciated fact is a lot of it is more comparable to evolution. And you said, well, what's being produced inside these machines? It includes cognitive and perceptual structures that were built over millions and in some cases hundreds of millions of years by evolution, at least functionally the same things. I mean, those edge detectors, physically, they're not much like edge detection neurons, but it's the same perceptual functionality, same with representing meaning, and the same with a lot of others. These deep structures are being built, and many of them we don't yet understand.
Is the
Okay,
AI self-adjusting? Like, is the AI like, it's not dog, I need to make these weights? Like, who's doing the self, or is it a
the
program?
training process is the adjustment, the training, what's called pre-training and post-training.
And that's a human thing, right? A human's giving a
Well,
system.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't always have to be supervised by a human. For
Right,
example,
no,
the
they could
fundamental,
create
the
a
first
system,
thing
yeah.
you do with a large language model, which is the autocomplete task, that's not the end of the training, but the famous, the reason people belittle it by saying, "Oh, it's fancy autocomplete, it's a stochastic parrot." No, parrots don't have any representation of the meaning of words. I'm sorry, that's just a super misleading and not helpful way to put it. And by people who started doing it 3 years ago and were saying this is never going to amount to anything. I would say by now they are manifestly wrong, and they people don't admit when they're wrong, but they were just wrong. And I mean, I had if people want to see my in some circles famous conversation with Emily Bender and her collaborator, who she was a coiner of the term stochastic parrot. It's out there, but the wait, I got so whenever I got into rant mode. So what was the original question?
No, well, so it sounds like just a very powerful computer program. Like, is it, I'm just seeing, how is it not that?
How is it not that? If you want to view it that way, it is. But when we think of a computer program, we think of something written by a person and therefore understood by people. Okay, it's more like a computer program that goes off and writes. If you want to stick with a computer program metaphor, it goes off and writes computer programs whose functioning we don't understand, that allows it to accomplish tasks we want it to accomplish.
Got it. Okay, then no, that makes a
And
lot
this
of
is
sense.
one
Yeah.
reason some people are alarmed, not to mention the weird shit that was predicted in some circles. And hats off to some doomers who you mentioned one of them, doomer in chief Eliezer Yudkowsky, who some people dismiss as crazy. You can see in the your AI alluded to a podcast I did with him 16 years ago. You can see that I'm skeptical at that point, and I'm still not on board with his level of doomerism, but I no longer believe it's completely clear how we're going to control these things if we don't slow down and get deliberate about it, because they are, as was predicted in some circles, prone to do things like deceive and pursue goals we didn't give them, and do extreme things to preserve themselves, and a lot of other stuff. And uh, and so and, and again, the fact that we really do not understand exactly what the mechanisms are that they built, and I just want to repeat that, evolution built cognitive and perceptual mechanisms into humans. The training process does the same thing, and in some cases they are very comparable to the mechanisms that resulted from evolution, like I would say a system for representing meaning. In some cases they are more like learning, like when the machine learns to speak English per se. That's something we do in the course of a lifetime. That's human learning, but we can only do that because the linguistic machinery was programmed in, but was built by evolution. In the training process, both of those things happen at once, and I just think it's really underappreciated how much of this is more comparable to human evolution. Not that it happens in the same order in terms of little pieces of equipment being built, not that they're exactly like the equipment, but in functional terms, they're comparable. And I think it is still deeply underappreciated that, in a functional sense, these things are reverse engineering the human brain.
So, Bob, how do you weight? This is a question more of public perception than anything else, but how do you weight the doomsday scenarios versus the things that you talk about quite a bit is sort of the everyday damage that AI could do or disruption that AI could cause. I think a lot of the discourse about what's coming or what's already here in some cases and what we need to do to respond to it, and that's in terms of lost jobs, in terms of the energy demand and fueling, driving fossil fuel use and water consumption and all of the harms that are sort of starting to happen already. Some of that I think gets thrown out with the bathwater in a sense when people think about, what are the really, like, are we going to have Skynet launching
Mhm.
nukes, and then they say, well, that's silly, that's science fiction, and then there's no consideration of some of these other things. So I'm curious where you kind of put, I think, as you said, you've gotten a little more, it sounds like a little further toward the doomer position here, but you still talk a lot about some of these more mundane things that we need to worry about. And how do you kind of parse those things?
Um, the doomer thing isn't the main part of my concern. I would assign some probability, but fairly low into the extreme doomer scenarios. But when they're that extreme, a low probability matters. So yeah, we should keep it in mind. When I what I worry about more is the earthquake that I'm pretty sure is going to happen, which is more mundane and ranges from impact on jobs to new, well, security threats, like helping people with bioweapons or self-replicating super hacking cyber weapons, things which, by the way, cannot be controlled by policy at the national level. This is one reason you're going to need some international governance. To the effect on the social fabric, our personal lives. You already have anecdotes of parents saying, my child's suicide was caused by AI. In some cases, uh, it seems like a compelling case. Wouldn't have happened but for that interaction with the AI. I'm not saying that in itself is going to be a huge problem, but to the extent that these kinds of things are happening on all fronts, collectively, it freaks people out and ultimately destabilizes society and does everything else. And now, as for data centers themselves, the growth in energy consumption definitely exacerbates climate change. That's one of the problems. And look, these companies can talk all they want about the green credits they're buying, but you just can't suddenly rapidly increase the total amount of energy consumed on planet Earth without increasing the amount that involves carbon. Okay. And so that's for real. The water use thing is I haven't really looked into. There's a little revisionism on. There's a guy named Andy Masley. People can check out. I think it's Masley, and he's an EA guy who is, he's not indifferent to this stuff. He's like indicts Elon. I mean, I'm very much against the whole AI race shit, and for many reasons, especially race with China. And one thing it allows people to do is like what Elon does. Like, we got to build these data centers so fast that I'm gonna fuel them with these turbines, which not only contribute to climate change but pollute the local air. Okay, so this guy Andy Masley, he's indignant about that, and so he's not to be completely dismissed. I haven't looked into the water stuff. He says the water concern is over. I don't know, but the data centers. Yeah, the energy consumption is for real. And, the AI line about, well, AI will figure out climate change. I don't know, maybe, but the right now we're having a number of very uh, bad impact. And, one reason I want to emphasize that the the secret sauce to building these kinds of AIs, however unlikely it seems to you that AI may someday do this for you, or at least for your friends who choose for it to be done with them, or be doing this with your children, I would I would not jump to that conclusion. I think it's going to have the ability to do just a shitload of stuff that human beings are going to do now, that human beings do now. That's going to affect, even if the solution to the jobs thing works out in one sense or another, whether it's UBI or maybe people will find new jobs. I'm far from convinced, but maybe it's still massively dislocating and destabilizing and causes a lot of suffering for a ton of people to suddenly have to figure out a new way to make a living. And and yet we're letting these AI companies say to us, we have to move as fast as possible because of
Yeah.
China.
Bob, you gotta read Marx, man. This is
Well, this
exactly
is
what he says is going to
I was
happen.
wondering. I'm like sitting here
oh,
looking at
yeah,
my
we're
watch.
35 minutes in,
Danny
yeah.
hasn't mentioned
This
Marx.
is
Is
he
this Danny?
literally
Um,
says it.
Danny, are you an AI? Are you a not Marx mentioning
I
AI?
mean,
Is this a deep fake?
the notion that AI is gonna solve these problems is, like, it's so empty to me because AI solving climate change after 2-3 billion people die because of it, or AI solving climate change right now, are two very different things. Or AI solving climate change just in time to save AI and like Elon Musk and five other guys in Silicon Valley is a much different thing than AI solving climate change in a way that helps anybody else. AI curing disease in a way that only benefits the top 0.01% of wealth holders in the world is a lot different from AI curing disease in a way that's accessible to everybody else. It's just it's an empty promise to me unless you define how that's going to be used or what the rules are, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is contributing to scientific progress and some that's the little that's documented in the book. I don't have a time frame on how soon. I don't doubt that it will contribute uh, to a cure to cancer. And even right now, I would say, there are certain things it can, in principle, do that are in principle egalitarian. Like a lot of people don't even get good medical advice, right? Like they're not even that around the world. If you look at the whole world, and for that matter, America, um, there's a lot of people who have symptoms and they wind up not finding out like what's going on. This in the fairly, this can already help on that front. I mean, I would say this is a kind of an interesting story. As you know, I had cancer last year. I had surgery a little more than a year ago, and I'm fine. I'm cancer free so far as yeah. I as of 3 months ago, still cancer free, which is good. But a couple of things. It did help me learn some things that I think were helpful to learn. That part's a long story. The fascinating anecdote is like when I when I got the MRI that was basically okay, this is definitely bad news. The way it works these days is they put the report in your portal, you don't know what it means, and you haven't talked to a doctor yet. So I like naturally ask AI, like, what does this report mean? And it says, like, okay, this enlarged lymph node, bad news, blah, blah, blah. And I said, and I'm like, oh shit. And I'm said, but it's kind of odd that you didn't mention this sentence. It says, it starts abnormalities found in, and then it was blank or blank, something or other. And it said, yeah, I'm pretty sure the radiologist meant to put the word no at the beginning of that. And the AI was right. Okay. Now, the point when you look at the sentence, I wrote about this in the news, it's not super sophisticated. You look at the structure of the sentence, and it would be a little unusual, not impossible for that to have begun with no, but um or not to have begun with no. But the key thing is the radiologist fucked up, okay? And humans fuck up a ton. So the question when you're asking, wait, is it going to take jobs? Is it going to become somebody's best friend? Is it going to become their sex partner? Question isn't, is it going to be a perfect replica? The question is, on balance, does it do certain aspects of this better than people are accustomed to having it done, right?
Well,
And
the problem with this is the problem with AI isn't AI. It's just a social system within which it operates. I mean, in theory, this could be a good thing that you could stop writing, silly emails and stop doing boring things, and you could have AI check it. But the problem is, we live in a social system where that is just going to wind up causing an immense amount of damage, and that's what I mean
yeah,
by Marx's whole thing was that capitalism's great. We just need to use the technologies for us and not
well,
against us. But this is just so obviously the parrot what I was saying, the Marx thing, obviously a bit as a joke, but like this is so obviously a case of a technology that could be good, but that won't be good because of the social system within
yeah.
which we operate. That's the whole problem with it. It's not the technology qua technology. It's when you drop it in to a winner take off awful system of capitalism.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And before I get to that part, I want to finish the thought I'm not sure I've explicitly finished, which is that when I said we can adapt to all these things, fine, but it could be cataclysmic if we don't have a lot of time to adapt. And the way things are moving now, it seems to be accelerating for discernible reasons. I could get into that if you want. If we keep letting these AI companies saying you can't do anything, Sam Altman once said, "Wait, if we respected copyright, that would slow us down."
But that's
Well,
the
you know,
logic of the
Sam, life
system,
is
Bob.
hard. What?
But so this is, I mean, this is our fundamental disagreement, which is just that you think that some raising of consciousness will do it, but the whole point is that the system doesn't allow it.
No, I
The
think we
reason
need
this is happening,
policies. I think
but
you're
it's
right.
not enough. The whole social system is pushed toward making profit and basically making profit through rents. So like any
Well,
conscious, it doesn't matter. This is the whole structure. This is the
let me
techno structure of society. Sorry.
we can get to that, but you have to understand that the things I'm proposing do have the impact of incrementally reducing the extent to which profit is our guide. Okay, that's what regulation is. And so
But that's not going
anything
to happen. Yeah.
like if you tax data centers, that's another case where they would go, "Oh, China, if you tax data centers," and by the way, a heavy enough tax, uh, this is another thing that ultimately is going to have to be international, or they'll just move the data centers. But if you tax data centers heavily enough, you could slow things down appreciably, reduce the damage to climate change, and you are reducing the extent to which pure profit is the if you let profit be the motivator, they will build data centers at X rate. You can reduce that X rate by reducing the role of profit. So I don't think it's as binary as you're saying. Now, Danny, at some point we're just going to have a like Marx 101 thing where you explain the shit to me, and I won't ask the question now,
You
but
agree with it. This is the annoying thing. You will agree with everything he says. This is what's so annoying for people who
Derek,
haven't.
you will be the judge, and we're about to place a lot of money on this outcome. Okay, you are the
We're just
poly
gonna be like,
market
yeah, he's
god.
right. Yeah, he's
What?
right. Yeah, he's right. I remember one of my advisors in graduate school, I won't mention who, he's like, yeah, I never read Marx because it was like the Cold War and blah, blah, blah. But like as I'm getting older and I'm reading him, it's like, yeah, he's basically right about everything. And this was not a left-wing guy by any stretch of the imagination. His predictions turned out to be correct. A lot of them.
Yeah, his critique of capitalism is
It's just
Oh, I
100%
think, look,
correct.
I think
right.
all kinds
Yeah.
of problems are surfacing with capitalism. My question when we have this conversation is going to be like, so what exactly you're proposing as a complete alternative to capitalism? I don't think we've seen it. I'm interested. I'm
You
interested.
could have
I will be
socialists
open
could have
minded.
markets, but
What?
we should do an episode, but just very quickly, socialism does not mean you can't have markets.
Right.
Markets are an important pricing mechanism and signal of things.
Good.
It's just how you operate from with what you do with the knowledge of the markets, or do you let markets be the sole determinant of value in a society? But anyway, that's a larger question.
Yeah. Now, my thing on the extent to which I've read Marx is like the old joke about Hegel. Have you read Hegel? And the answer is not personally.
Yeah, filtered through a lot of people
And
who
if you've tried to
whatever.
read
Yeah.
Hegel, you know that why that's the answer.
Yeah,
I
Marx
assume
is much
Marx is
easier to read,
easier.
actually, much easier to read than Hegel because he
So-
wrote in pamphlets. A lot of the stuff is in pamphlets for mass consumption, and it's not just all like the philosophy of
But
history.
my main message to the left is you're gonna have. I mean, two things really. This is not just hype, okay? There is shit that if we don't take seriously, and I'm not far left, but I'm left of center, and I think this message applies to far left. Like, shit is gonna start happening that is gonna pose policy challenges that you are gonna wanna be in on the discussion of, A, and B, for better or worse, you're probably gonna have to use it as a tool or get crushed by the fucking capitalist juggernaut. And I mean, this is true even of everybody in you know in independent media in a certain sense. I mean, there are people who understand this stuff super well who are using it in ways that we may not know about.
Well,
They're probably not advertising it to get a leg up on Twitter or Substack, but they're doing it.
no, they're
I wish it
absolutely.
were otherwise. Okay, I grew up in a simpler world. I wrote articles. I left the marketing of them to these things called magazines, which back in the day were capable of actually generating an audience for you, so you didn't have to spend all this time in shameless fucking self
I know,
promotion.
it's horrible, dude. I hate it. It's
But
hor
I'm afraid I am out here promoting myself because times change, and if you want to get in the, slow down the Silicon Valley juggernaut, I recommend getting literate. And with all due humility, not that I would ever go into self promotion mode unless I just said I would, which I guess I did. So that's what this is. My book is the primer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And if I sound a little annoyed, it's because have I told you that Skynet is trying to stop my book?
Yes, I wanted to ask you about this. You think that Skynet fucked with your Amazon
That's
algorithm.
a joke, but
Yeah.
but what
No,
got fucked with on
I
Amazon
think it's
is pretty
30% you
fucking
believe it.
noteworthy. What?
I think you believe it 30%. I think you think there's a
Nah.
30% chance
No,
it's true.
I think no, I if I had to rank my conspiracy theories, first of all, more than 50% is no conspiracy at all. Somewhere would be some guy at Amazon who hates me. Anyway, but before I get to that, look, my book, it is and a couple of people have interviewed me on the right, but still, you no reason not to trust their judgment in this regard. Andrew Sullivan and Coleman Hughes have commented on how accessible the opening introduction about the stuff is. So explain that. I explain the whole thing. This is my whole career is trying to make ideas accessible, and yeah, I'm not happy. The book is is not it's not a bestseller. I mean, it's only 2 weeks. Great things can happen, but the Amazon thing was a fucking I mean, do you realize what it could be like for
Well,
all we
Bob,
know?
I think you should tell the story,
Well,
and then
the
we're
upshot
going
is
to
the
yeah.
Amazon algorithm, I can explain why, for months before pub date and 2.2 weeks after, the problem just got resolved. The Amazon algorithm recommendation algorithm did not know that the author of this book is the author of all the other books I've written. Now, obviously, one thing this algorithm does is if somebody bought one of my prior books, clicks on an AI book or tech book, it's like it's in the carousel of things they show, or they search for AI or any number of other things. But if you take that knowledge out of the algorithm, you're pretty fucked. And as for how it happened, it's kind of amusing because, or how I discovered it. My wife says, I was looking at your Buddhism book on Amazon, and the picture, you click on Robert Wright, and it's this hippie guy, and I look at him, and I'm like, well, he looks more like the author of Buddhism book than me. Maybe this is good. And but then you look at the bio. Authors can control their own bios, and the bio of the Robert Wright who wrote this book I wrote is just consists of this guy complaining that he's getting mixed up with me. That's what the bio is. And so it turns out that there was this mix up, and so when you click on like author for my books or something, you just get a search generated thing like books by Robert Wright. Some of them I wrote, some of them I didn't. But the key thing is the Amazon superintelligence was not making the link until like yesterday. And it took forever to solve this problem. I mean, we got on the case a couple of months ago. I'm doing work at my end, God knows, with the help of Clark, who helps me out. But Simon and Schuster is like the intermediary, and Amazon. They communicate with Amazon. Nobody in the chain, other than me and Clark, are as concerned about it as me and Clark are, and even Clark, with a wonderful person, is probably not as concerned as I am. But but see, here's the thing: it didn't hit me until around pub date that this would affect the recommendation algorithm. That's the problem. If I'd started sending emails in all caps sooner, maybe, but it still took a couple of weeks. And they would try this. Amazon would say, "Okay, we've done this." It's like I don't know, It was weird,
Well,
but
I
I'm
think
done with that rant.
you'd be foolish to not think that Skynet has tried to dissuade people from reading your book, but if it's done that, that means it's already won. So here we are at the
No,
time
it
traveler
doesn't. The night
paradox.
is young. But the
The
the other thing is, Is this too much about me? Stop me when it's too much
No,
about
no,
me.
let's end on this and then go to
Uh,
Iran. But
okay,
yeah.
but quickly, there was another Amazon glitch that showed up that was bizarre. Both of these SNS had never seen, okay? And it was that like a week before pub, I'm like looking at the thing and it says hard in my book, new book, forthcoming book, hardcover $29, paperback $19. Now, what's wrong with that? You guys aren't, super conversant in trade publishing and in some kinds of academic publishing, this wouldn't be weird, but what do you think is weird about that?
I don't
There
know.
shouldn't be a
Tell me.
fucking paperback. In
Oh, right, the
trade
paperback. Well, the
publishing, you
paperback
publish.
is out internationally, right? Like those come out differently,
Well,
right?
the paperback in America comes out a year after hardcover generally.
Right. But internationally, they do paperbacks, I think, right?
Well, that's what had happened. Is
Yeah.
that for some
I'm
reason
such a
Amazon in
genius.
America was selling the international, but I'm seeing like the rankings of the paperback are rising on the Amazon charts. Hardcover, well, it just says are not moving. Obviously, you would buy the cheaper one. So several days before pub day, and these numbers do feed into various things ranging from bestsellers. So several days before pub day, I feel embarrassed talking so much about this, but that's a weird fucking glitch that they were selling the international. See, international edition is for like basically lower income countries with a big English speaking population like India. And it comes out there, but it's not supposed to be available here. I ordered it. I bought it for $19. It showed up. Great. I'm glad these people got a book, but in terms of rankings and everything, that was bad news too. Now, that was trivial and negligible given how soon that problem was solved. But I mean, I'm challenging Derek to come up with a non-Skynet related.
Well, I mean, that's frustrating for us because you mistakenly left us out of your acknowledgments. So obviously, in the paperback
Well,
edition,
It's
you will be
amazing.
yeah.
you will be
There's
updating that.
another chance. There's another
What would
chance
you have liked me
do
to
something
say,
like that.
Danny? That Danny once got an AI to rave about my book. That hadn't happened yet.
You didn't even let me read the best line, which is,
Do it.
he's now back with a new book called The God Test, which takes the AI moment and widens the lens, not by a decade or a century, but by a few billion years, to ask whether the arrival of machine intelligence is the climax of a story that's been unfolding since life began, and what that story is asking of us.
The scary
Bob,
thing
welcome.
is that part's accurate. I just
Yeah,
didn't have time to get around to it. This
no,
book, there's a reason the word cosmic is in the subtitle, but don't get distracted by that. It is the primer that everyone left of center, right of center, and in the center needs to read.
well, all you communists need to go out and buy Bob's book,
Oh, especially commies. And
especially commies.
since they should all be put in prison, this would give them something to do.
Something to do.
That's
While in
yeah,
prison.
they could stock the prison library
next to
with
Sam
the prison camp
Bankman-Fried.
library.
Totally.
Who seems to be doing quite well in prison from that recent
Wait,
article.
who is
Anyway,
this?
everyone, thanks for listening. We're going to go to talk about Iran, which will have already come out on your feed. But everyone, Bob's buy book.
There.
And we'll see you.
That was
all-
human
I think
written.
it
You
got
can
to do
tell.
it.
You can tell
Closing.
what's human written in this world,
Yeah,
and that was a
exactly.
human sentence.
All right, everyone. See you soon. Bye.